tell us when we're live.
Yep. You're live.
We are delighted to convene this roundtable on concrete movement towards unitive justice and global security as part of World Unity Week, and especially on the day dedicated to biodiversity. We recognize how central the role of right relationships to nature is in a viable path towards unitive justice and global security. As Susan Eyrich said in the first panel this morning, without right relationships, we are orphaned. And to protect them, we have to hold each other accountable. That is precisely the massive educational effort that this Synergy Circle hopes to launch. The Synergy Circle aims to explore what unitive justice and global security may look like amidst our existential climate, environmental, and political crises, and why it requires an energetic and empowered collective movement toward a federalist international structure. In an unavoidably interdependent world, justice, which unites the human family and allows dissension to be constructively processed, is the only way out of our current quagmire. It is, as Audrey Kitagawa said in a previous meeting of this circle, it is no less than love in action. Yet the forces of separation and divisiveness are strong and require a massive collective effort to synergize and scale up unifying processes. It is a matter of consciousness change through a vast educational campaign to clarify the principles of unitive justice and human security, so that we can learn to move through conflict with loving kindness and concern for the security of all, and towards whole system transformation. This Synergy Circle envisions broad-scale alliances for consciousness change and for ambassadors who can advocate for strong institutions of global governance. And so if anyone in the audience feels moved to participate in this work, please leave your contact information and the core team will contact you in time. Today, we have gathered here a diverse and powerful panel of experts in many of the areas that inform the question of unitive justice and human security in a deeply divisive and fragile global environment. Initially, each panelist will have 3 minutes to contribute a specific angle on our topic, after which we hope to launch into a discussion. Questions from the audience can be put in the chat and we will attempt to address them in the discussion part. We will start with Chief Phil Lane Jr. Chief Lane is the chairperson of the Four Worlds International University, member of the Council of Elders of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and global trustee of the United Religions Initiative. Chief Lane, as a hereditary indigenous chief who has dedicated his life's work to fostering the advancement of Native people and their opportunity to contribute to the transformation of global society, what can you tell us about the indigenous wisdom perspective on how unitive justice can be achieved at this difficult time in the world?
Mitaki Epi, my very, very respected and honored members of our human family. The very core of the indigenous worldview, from my perspective, is the understanding of the prior unity and oneness of our human family and all life, and that the herd of one is a herd of all. In the honor of uplifting of one is the honor of uplifting of all. This is basic. This basic understanding of oneness, then in building a new global civilization, which all our prophecies foretell for more than 500 years that this would happen, is built on justice. Because with oneness, there must be justice. And with justice and oneness, there must be the understanding, first of all, because there will be no peace as long as the oppression and abuse of women lasts upon this Mother Earth. Because the wing of the eagle, the wing of the condor, the wing of the quetzal has male and female. Until both wings of the eagle of humanity, of the quetzal of humanity, of the condor of humanity have wings with equal power, respect, and honor, the eagle, quetzal, and condor of humanity will never fly its highest. And it's this understanding of oneness results in this equality of women and men. Not only that, we know as Indigenous people that each of us, every human being, whether aware of it or not, are born in this world as sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. Born with a soul that transcends this physical world of time and space. A soul that has no ethnicity, has no gender, has no class, a soul that reflects the oneness of the Creator, the oneness of this life. And so, without question, all the sacred prophecies, and it's very interesting, two Christian-related or Christian Judaic-related faiths. First, the Lds Faith, clear back in the early 1800s, foretold in their prophecies the indigenous people would rise like a rose in the desert, would rise up. But very interesting, in 1916, Abdu'l-Baha wrote quite an in-depth prophecy when all the scholars said that the indigenous people were going to be no more. And of course, understanding when Columbus came here, there was over 100 million, around 100 million indigenous people, reduced to about 15 million during this, mainly from disease. But not only has that not happened, but these values, these guiding principles that are at the heart and core, not only just indigenous cultures, but cultures everywhere on the Mother Earth that need to be awakened, because we are one human family. There must be this understanding, equality of women and men, universal education, the balancing extremes of wealth and poverty, all those things which are dependent on justice. And for security, we believe, last thing I want to say, that by 2030, whether nation states want to at this point or not, they will be forced to, in one way or the other, to come together and make a binding peace treaty that will end war. So I believe this 99 days of unity, of peace through unity is at the core of this. And that goal of the United Nations that we're all looking towards, an International Week of Peace, is ending racism and building peace. The only way to end racism is finally to wake up. We are one human family. No matter what our exterior looks like, we're 99.9% the same. This is just the old suit. And it changes awful quick.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
If I could bring this computer inside my body and give you a great big hug, I would. I send you my love.
Well, you did with your words and with your spirit, you embraced us. Thank you so
Thank you,
very,
I love you.
much. Thank you, Brother Phil. We now turn to Audrey Kitagawa. Audrey is president and founder of the International Academy of Multicultural Cooperation, former chair of the Parliament of World Religions, and former advisor to the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict at the United Nations. Audrey, thank you so much for being here with us today, particularly as you are due at yet another event within the hour. We really appreciate you making it possible to join this forum. And because you have written so deeply on how globalization has actually fueled religious and ethnic conflict, you know all too well that to move from that to appreciating that we cannot have real justice in our lives unless it is also unitive with relation to fellow human beings, even the ones we fear, that is a huge challenge. Can you share your thoughts on how the development of a spiritual culture and education can help move people toward an appreciation of the unitive nature of true justice? Since you have been awarded the Spirit of the UN Award, how can we inspire others to not fear, but to embrace this spirit?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone from Rome, Italy. First, allow me to express my deepest appreciation to you, Elena, Ben Bowler, Kurt Johnson, and John Raymer for this opportunity to be with the World Unity Week family to have this discussion about the concrete movement toward unitive justice and global security. We are seeing more and more this focus on movements, a mobilization of civil society around the world to become the expressions itself of our values in action, what we care about, what is important to us in the multitude of ways which says, I do care and I am willing to put my life's energies and commitment towards making this world a better place. As these movements take flight on the wings of justice, we see the power of the united voices of civil society in the court of public opinion to create positive transformation. Justice means that modality by which we seek out what is fair and reasonable in the processes of moving through our relationships with each other. Unitive justice, as this group is creating awareness of and a culture toward, which comes from that place of loving kindness as the foundation of causing no harm to others. It is a values-based modality which is free of punitive elements and is, in short, love in action. And thank you so much, Elena, for indicating that I have addressed those powerful words, love in action, previously, and you will hear me do that articulation many times over in the future as well. It shifts us from the mentations of the mind to the heart to achieve mutual understanding by returning to our shared humanity, harmony, and balance. As these movements grow, we are creating that educational opportunity through our activism and advocacy to fashion the dilation of the insular mind to the global heart that is inclusive, connected, and mutually beneficial at its core. Because the basis of this movement is founded on a recognition that we are spiritual beings employing spiritual values and principles. The ensuing movement and actions arising from that foundation can be ensured to be that expression of loving kindness in action. When you move from that place of love, fear disappears. Fear arises from the perception of separation and individuation that causes self-interest and self-protection to arise. When one is in the sacred heart of love, we awaken to the reality that we are all one seamless whole, and we do no harm to another, for the other is myself, as Chief Lane said. From the sacred heart of love arises that inspiration which speaks to our infinite potentiality to develop into the ever-expanding consciousness that grows in the field of possibilities. That field, which ever whispers to us to move through the world with humility and kindness and gratitude to the divine creator of all there is, who presents us with these opportunities to share love. Thank you so much, Elena.
Thank you so much, dear Audrey. That was truly inspirational. And we're very, very grateful for your presence among us and for these thoughts. And really, thoughts from the heart. Now, we would like to hear from Jonathan Granoff, Jonathan Granoff is president of the Global Security Institute, senior advisor and representative to the United Nations of the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summits of Nobel Peace Laureates, ambassador for peace, security, and nuclear disarmament of the Parliament of World Religions. Jonathan, you have pioneered at the level of the United Nations the need to refocus our collective commitment from concepts of national security, which pervert national identities and use them in the service of violence, to the much more universally relevant concept of human security. Please share with us what you see as the most critical focus in a massive effort to educate towards rethinking of national identities and recognizing the universal and foundational need for human security.
Thank you so much for convening this. Ben, thank you for bringing us together. John, thank you for bringing us together. And I want to thank the previous speakers for grounding our discussion in the reality of the unity of being that manifests in the multiplicity of our different reflections. Every one of us has a unique face. Every one of us is a unique expression of that. It would be remiss not to realize each of our uniqueness. It would equally be remiss for any wave to think that it's separate from the ocean. And similarly, in order to stop the massive killing over religious interpretations in the 17th century, the nation state was created at the Councils of Westphalia in 1648. It's a human creation. The origin of the authority of the state comes from the multiple expressions of the people who give the state authority in order to express the value of peace and security. But the state is our creation to express our values as people. Just like you can be a citizen of London, a citizen of Paris, and a citizen of France, and a citizen of the United Kingdom, we now know in order to express our value of the unity of the human family as a spiritual insight that the wise since time immemorial have asserted, and as in the Upanishads, it says the world is one family. Ancient, ancient wisdom, as Chief Phil pointed out, we come from the one. But that insight has now become a practical necessity because there's a number of issues that cannot be addressed and thus express our value of survival and honoring the core unity of being without a different perspective. Military nationalism, spending upwards of $2 trillion a year in the pursuit of security by states through the threat and use of force, cannot and never will be able to protect the climate. Cannot and never will be able to protect our third lung, the phytoplankton that provides 50 to 70% of our oxygen and depends on the health of the oceans. Cannot and will not ever be able to protect us from pandemics, which don't recognize borders, and so many other very dynamic and very real threats to the very survival of humanity. So we are in a unique existential moment in which the admonition of the wise to see the human family as one and the practical necessity to do so converge. The greatest threat that we face are our own creation, nuclear weapons, and the distortion of the climate of the planet Earth. That is the path of the so-called realists who live on the myths of the pursuit of force and the threat of force, and the myth that the human community is separate from the natural world. We are the realists. We are saying we must have human security based on the unity of the human family, the realism that science tells us of our relationship to the natural world, and the spiritual insight of the wise of all traditions. We are one human family. We live on one living organism called the planet Earth. It is a miracle, and it is also morally incorrect for us to treat it as a mere commodity. It is a sacred gift, as every individual life is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you. It is beautiful how this tapestry is becoming woven by each next speaker in such an interconnected way. We now turn to Jude Caravan. Jude Caravan is the co-founder of the Whole World View, cosmologist and author whose work integrates leading edge science with research into consciousness and universal wisdom teachings. Her latest book is The Cosmic Hologram, Information at the Center of Creation. Jude, as a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Sustainable Development Goals Synergy Circle, you recently co-authored a powerful statement on a new unitive narrative emerging from groundbreaking scientific discoveries, which radically expand our perception of the world. Please share your thoughts on how a unitive narrative can help antagonistic and suffering human groups to see a viable alternative to sustained conflict.
Thank you, Elena, and everyone. Well, from the earliest times, human beings have shared narratives to try and understand the nature of the world and our place in it. We've sought to integrate our inner and outer experiences of life, and vitally to imbue them with meaning and purpose. Earlier narratives, though, have increasingly been peripheralized and superseded by a paradigm based on a secular science of solely materialistic reality and a worldview of apparent separation. This paradigm co-evolved with economic and political power systems, creating and justifying unprecedented levels of conflict and inequity. In considering evolution to be driven by random occurrences and mutations, secular science also views immaterial mind and consciousness without explanation as somehow and solely arising from material brains. While such a perceptions enabled us to achieve significant technological innovations, its cosmology describes a universe devoid of life-affirming meaning and bereft of purpose. And despite their benefits, its technologies still suffer in their outward applications from the same deficit, a disassociation from our innate humanity and kinship with all life and cultures on Earth. This has progressively driven a schism in our collective psyche and motivated duality-based and unsustainable behaviors that have now come to existentially threaten our collective future as a species, as well as our planetary home, Mother Earth, Gaia. Now, however, the presumptions of the secular science of separation are being found to be fundamentally flawed, and instead, scientific breakthroughs and vitally the growing evidence at all scales of existence and across many fields of research is revealing an understanding of the unified nature of reality, showing an inherent meaning and evolutionary purpose embodied by our entire universe, Gaia, and ourselves, and the realization that we're inseparable from each other and the entirety of reality. And this has enabled a unitive narrative to emerge. To paraphrase Albert Einstein, we cannot solve a problem from the same mindset that created it. A worldview and mindset of separation drives a world of suffering, where inequalities, conflicts, and injustices are apparently rational behaviors. The evidence-based understanding, though, of this emergent whole world view and a unitive narrative instead can underpin an evolution of our collective consciousness and mindset as we remember who we really are and our unity embodied in our diversity, that then naturally invites and encourages us to come together, empowering inclusive, and love-based choices and love in action, Audrey, unitive justice and authentic peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jude. It is truly inspirational. And the vision is growing and expanding with each next soul coming forth and sharing their gift. We now turn to Scott Allen Carlin. Scott is a geographer at Long Island University, professor, evolutionary leader, former second vice president of Global NGO Executive Committee, former co-chair of the Steering Committee for the International Day of Education for Global Citizenship, coordinator at the Wyandotte Community Advisory Board. So, Scott, I turn to you now because your dedicated global efforts have been recently focused on promoting understanding of the United Nations Development Program report, New Threats to Human Security in the Anthropocene, as well as on the UN 2030 agenda of leaving no one behind. So, Scott, can you tell us your thoughts on how we can reframe the unitive narrative that was so beautifully shared in such practical terms that can help local communities expand their sense of human community? We can't hear you, Scott. You're muted. Oh,
So,
you can.
There we go. Okay, I didn't have control over my mute button. Thank
Sorry
you.
about
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here, Elena, with you and all of these esteemed speakers. And I also want to acknowledge all of our participants that are joining us, that are helping to fill out the collective we that we're speaking to. We have these wonderful ideas that are being presented today, but imagine if all 100 plus of us that are on this Zoom call right now were able to do a kind of collective mind hive and just kind of generate even more fascinating ideas together. That's kind of a teaser, I think, for where we're trying to move forward this decade. And I love Chief Phil's imagery that he gave us of the male and the female, and that the wings are of each. So we can't have proper flight without the male and the female in balance. Our brains are wired that way as well. We have a left brain, a right brain to kind of guide our critical thinking, as also to guide our kind of more expansive, spiritual, creative lives. And the more that we deepen and cultivate our education systems, where they're not just about the critical thinking, or they're not overbalanced in the direction of critical thinking, but they're rebalanced. So in a sense, there's pathways forward for each of us to be working in our own personal education, through the public education systems of the children in our lives, to work immediately on this rebalancing of our brains. And I loved Jonathan Granoff's imagery of a third lung. So if we think about every breath, right, if we're able to pause for just a microsecond for each breath and take a moment of gratitude for how powerful the human breath is, and that breath immediately links us collectively to these planetary systems, the amazing productivity of our oceans, and their vulnerability today, so that we recommit collectively to that. So those are some immediate ways to kind of ground us and help us to think in concrete ways, because that thinking, that loving kindness that Audrey spoke of, this is a wonderful gift that we give to everybody in our lives when we speak from our hearts with loving kindness. Let me turn for a moment to just a couple of comments from the UNDP's new report talking about the Anthropocene, this new world that we now inhabit, and the need to kind of deeply rethink human security. This is a 2022 report. New Threats to Human Security in the Anthropocene is the formal title. So UNDP writes, military spending shows no signs of abating. Instead of a peace dividend, we confront a world with violent conflict, affecting more than 1 billion people. They also note that poverty and hunger are greater than just 5 years ago, and a generation-wide education crisis will have long-lasting consequences. So this is the context of our immediate world that calls for this redefinition of human security. So one of the things this report does is it elevates this idea of human solidarity as something we need to push forward in our lives and in the UN system. So I think this is something that those of us who are excited about the Unitive narrative can work with as a point of conversation. What does this mean, human solidarity, at this current moment in time? How do we make this more meaningful and exciting in people's lives? And I think that all of us on the call today believe the Unitive narrative can help support the UNDP. I believe it's important this year and into next year to open up lines of communication with UNDP leadership about why the Unitive narrative can be an important part of their work. There's a three-prong effort that they underscore in this redefinition of human security. The first being solidarity, the next two being empowerment and protection. We are looking to build a world where people truly feel empowered in their lives and where they have basic protections, they have clean air, they have clean water, they have access to food. And these three elements of solidarity, empowerment, and protection, that forms the foundation for a new model of human agency. So I'll stop there, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you. You are pointing us in another very constructive direction here, which hopefully very soon in our discussion we'll be able to see how it all weaves together. At this time, we turn to Maya Groff. Maya, thank you so much for being with us. Maya is an international lawyer based in The Hague, convener of the Climate Governance Commission, and co-chair of the Coordinating Committee for the International Anti-Corruption Court, the IACC. She's a co-winner of a major international prize in 2018 on global governance innovation. It is the New Shape Prize, and co-author of the 2020 book, Global Governance and the Emergence of Global Institutions for the 21st Century. So Maya, your work on convening the Climate Commission, as well as your multifaceted efforts as a lawyer focused on strengthening institutions of global governance, put you in a unique position to comment on the importance and urgency of implementing international courts with full jurisdiction reach that can begin to create the legal foundation for global unitive justice. So please share with us where you see the most important focal point at this time.
Yes, thank you very much, Elena. It's lovely to be with all of you at this important conversation. So yes, as Elena mentioned, my practice as an international lawyer for about 15 years now, working on binding international treaties at various international criminal tribunals in The Hague, has really made me very hopeful and aware of this incredible capacity of policymakers, of our leaders to really understand the power of cooperation and the enthusiasm and joy indeed that comes from putting in place new effective institution and new international law. So I very much agree with Elena's comment that we need to strengthen our international justice institutions, core institutions, supplement various important gaps for the regulation of global society to tackle our really tough problems that we're confronting at the moment. And I think, strengthening our core international justice institutions would be, of course, increasing the efficacy of our global governance, tackling really tough problems that we're facing, climate change, global heating, maybe the better terminology because of its really profound gravity, related ecological crises, and also disarmament. It was mentioned disarmament. We need to strengthen our peaceful settlement mechanisms if we are going to really benefit from peace dividends at the international level and around the world. So strengthening justice institutions would be very practical steps taken forward for establishing what Chief Phil Lane was saying about this justice foundation for a truly peaceful world, a sustainable peace, but also it would be a symbol of our shared humanity and that we are in fact an international community of human beings. So it would be a very powerful step forward. And you already see this happening, for example, with the International Criminal Court, the crime of ecocide and genocide, which the global public around the world has really understood that there are these key issues of global and international justice that they're passionate about. So in terms of my proposals, I only have a couple of minutes, but I've written a few short policy papers in addition to the longer book, proposing sort of a package, an international rule of law package of the next steps we could take to improve our international justice institutions. So for example, strengthening the International Court of Justice, which was created at the time of the adoption of the UN Charter, that most people don't know, only 40% of UN members have accepted the compulsory jurisdiction of this court, and it hasn't been modernized for 75 plus years since the adoption of the Charter. The International Criminal Court, as a key, much more modern institution, should be, of course, a universal institution. We're working to establish a new international anti-corruption court for grand corruption, for the highest levels of corruption of public officials around the world. We need to also enhance our international justice capacities for rule of law, for climate and environment, international environmental issues, which we know from countless experts, it's just appallingly weak. We have excellent norms in global ecological environmental governance, but the implementation and enforcement is just woefully inadequate. So that's just a few of the different aspects of this package that I've proposed. So just one last point on sort of implementation pathways. There's a lot of simply inertia. There are spoilers. There's resistance of certain actors who just are entrenched in the status quo. Maybe their interests, might be limited or shifted by the strength of the international institutions. But there's also just inertia in the system and a lack of vital new ideas that can really confront our global problems. So we will need very likely a global citizen and youth movement to try to push forward these international legal reforms. And the very good news about that is that we've had extraordinary achievements, such as the creation of the International Criminal Court, the Convention on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the Landmines Treaty, which have been largely citizen-led initiatives that have been extraordinarily successful to institute new reforms. So just to say that movements such as for Unitive Justice, these kind of public and citizen dialogues are vitally important if we're going to take the next steps at this international level for the international legal architecture. So thank you very much. I'll end there.
Thank you very, very much. It is truly appreciated how concretely you focus our eyes and the eyes of the envisioned movements forward on very concrete steps towards international jurisdiction that actually reaches and is able to protect unitive justice. So this was very helpful. We now turn to David Lorimer, Director of the Scientific and Medical Network, also editor of the Paradigm Explorer, fellow of the International Futures Forum, and founder of the Galileo Commission. Also, David is an interdisciplinary polymath. David, your deep and diverse interdisciplinary work in consciousness evolution, from both a scientific and a humanities perspective, has been dedicated to expanding the scope of science beyond a materialist worldview. You have convened important forums that work from a spiritual perspective and apply the scientific method to urgent issues. Can you speak on critical aspects of biosecurity as it pertains to mobilizing a global movement towards unitive justice?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I'd like to think that I'm speaking in continuity with my great-grandfather here, James Lorimer, who in 1883 published 2-volume The Institutes of the Law of Nations, calling for a permanent Congress of Nations, rather prescient, I think. I'd like to start my remarks with Daodejing 17. I read this every morning. And this one says this: great rulers are unnoticed by the people. The next best are loved and praised. The next best are feared. The next best are scorned. And here's the key phrase: when trustworthiness declines, trust is not returned. And this morning, I've also been reading John Perkins's new book called Touching the Jaguar, which talks about dream change. And this is what we need, dream change. And we need a new story, as Jude has also emphasized, to tell ourselves. So I'm going to be very succinct, if I can be, and offer you a few propositions in which biosecurity is contextualized. First one, life is inherently uncertain, open, and creative. We can reimagine the future. I think everybody will agree with that. Outer reality is a reflection and manifestation of our ideas and desires, the eagle and the condor. Global security has to be mutual, shared, indivisible, interdependent, and multipolar. If you want peace, prepare for peace. Global security can never be achieved through fear, militarism, violence, domination, hegemony, deception, manipulation, coercion, and preparing for war, with the aim of full spectrum dominance, including nuclear, biological, chemical, and space weapons. And all of this is underpinned by the mechanistic idea of the human as a machine moving towards transhumanism, rather than as a fundamentally spiritual being, which has been stressed by Audrey. Biosecurity is now at the forefront, but I regard it as the latest way of controlling individuals and populations by sustaining public fear through what Matthias Desmet, in his new book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism, calls objects of anxiety, moving from war on terror to war against the virus, which justifies the biosecurity state. And in his new and very important book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bobby Kennedy explains how authoritarian biosecurity plans were simulated at a series of scenario war games involving the CIA and pharmaceutical companies and government officials, precisely rolled out with COVID-19, and this event 201 was the last of these in October 2019, as centralized autocratic governance and censorship. This is not security, this is authoritarianism. And what we're finding is that rivalry and fear are driving human augmentation and the AI development of lethal autonomous weapons. So there's an arms race to keep ahead because of this framework of rivalry and fear. And the other point that nobody has made yet is that the shadow is not owned and is projected onto the other as an enemy image when we are also carrying the shadow. So I say, let rivalry be ethical, not military, in service of the common good. Global security, in my view, is predicated on environmental security, which cannot be achieved within the existing economic system of domination, control, extraction, and exploitation. This death economy, as John Perkins calls it, can only lead to extinction. So environmental security means transitioning to a life economy, as Vandana Shiva and others have proposed, based on what's already been said by people, the oneness of life and mind, entailing for me an ethic of interconnectedness. So I conclude with a return to what I've been emphasizing over the last couple of years, the spiritual first principles of the Bulgarian sage Peter Dernov: love, wisdom, truth, justice, and goodness in a pentagram joining these together. So my key question for us as a panel leading to this fundamental system change that we need. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. Would you kindly please repeat your key question, because the connection was lost just as you were articulating it. Once again, just the key question, please.
How can we build trust leading to fundamental system change?
Excellent.
Which goes back to the original Daodejing, when trustworthiness declines, trust is not returned.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. Excellent question to move us forward. Thank you, David. And we now move to our last panel speaker, after which we'll have a little bit of time for discussion. And that's Earl Possard. Earl is a wildlife conservationist who has worked with over 40 countries on implementing marine turtle conservation in partnership with governments, NGOs, and communities. He brings vast experience in worldwide education of communities and stakeholders at every level on the vital interdependence between preserving biodiversity and human well-being. And so, since this is the Day of Biodiversity, it is all too poignant for us to end the comments of this panel with Earl. And Earl, I turn to you. After 40 plus years in US government service and work with communities and stakeholders around the world, what has your vast experience taught you about broadening the sense of we and conserving biodiversity as it relates to unitive justice?
Well, thank you. And I have to say, I'm a little overwhelmed right now, taking in all this information in ideas and thoughts and from all the other panelists. And now I'm going to talk about turtles. So, but I would think and like to reframe the question into maybe what have turtles taught me about creating the greater we, both with the shared life forms and biodiversity of our planet and with our shared human family. And trying to boil it down to 3 minutes is challenging, but I will start with saying that in my experience, I have found that working with communities and other stakeholders impacting on our biodiversity and various species, working with the conceptual idea of and reality of what biodiversity does not really engage in a way that we need to affect change in behavior. And what really I have found works is working with concrete species where people can get grounded and start to feel that the reality of these particular creatures, they have some connection with it. And I have found one of the species or group of species that lends itself most to this way of educating and connecting our communities is our sea turtles, because they have a very complex life cycle. They have huge migrations, long migrations that connect many parts of the ocean in many countries. And in that way, they're often referred to as ambassadors of the ocean. And I can give a couple examples of this, but I think the bottom line for me is they in some way help people to see what often is just this other thing as a real living creature, not just an other, but something they can feel, they can connect with, and they can relate it to their particular lives. And to give an example, the loggerhead sea turtle, which nests in large numbers along the southeastern US and in Cuba and the Bahamas, has a life cycle where the nesting females nest on the southeastern beaches in large numbers, and the little hatchlings swim out in great faith to the Gulf Stream, which can be several kilometers or 30 kilometers offshore. They passively drift across the North Atlantic, spin off several months later into the Northeast Atlantic around the Azores, into the Western Mediterranean, where they continue to grow up as young juveniles into larger immatures, where they then catch the equatorial currents off of Morocco back west to the southeastern US, Cuba, where they finish growing up, and ultimately the females nest back on the nesting beaches, and the males also join them for some mating before that. But in this life cycle and migration, we have connected both the US, Cuba, Spain, Portugal, Morocco, and not just the countries and the governments, but we're connecting the fishermen that work off of Spain in their longline fisheries that catch turtles accidentally and have great impacts on them, and what we try to do in the US on nesting beaches, but have never seen a nesting turtle. So we have brought, I will finish very quickly here, but we have brought Spanish longline fisher captains, teachers and educators from Spain, and filmmakers to the nesting beaches of the US. And this is the first time they've sat down with these turtles and actually started to see them as like real live things. And it has changed them profoundly. And I can give many stories around the world where this experience, just being with these creatures for some reason, just profoundly has an impact on them. And this longline fishing captain now is one of our biggest conservation advocates within the fishing community in Spain. So that's just a small example, but again, they're ambassadors of the oceans. They're teaching us how to create the greater we with the living creatures, that sea turtles are just part of that habitat, that ocean habitat and nesting beach. And in the larger we of the fishermen, the others that are interacting with sea turtles intentionally or unintentionally. And so when we start to have these collaborative efforts, I think we start to work with reciprocity, integrity, and humility, and that is by definition building a greater we. And I'll end it with that. And I could talk a lot about turtles. I love talking about turtles.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Earl. You have definitely helped us feel the power of binding hearts to nature through particular species, and particular species who are ambassadors: sea turtles, birds, migratory birds, and other species that really help human beings connect the dots between our souls and living nature. Friends, as we're moving into the discussion part of our panel, I just would like to share with you that I'm hosting this roundtable from Sofia, Bulgaria, where the need for all the changes discussed above is particularly tangible. As many of you may know, in Central and Eastern Europe, the old totalitarian secret service system has gone after the justice system and courageous judges, as well as after the media, in a concerted effort to undermine public trust in the courts, in governments, and in the possibility of truth and of the just resolution of grievances. This approach, as we know, has extended to seeking to undermine democratic processes in the US, in Spain, and in other parts of the democratic world, but its impact is particularly strongly felt in weak fledgling democracies like Bulgaria. So the need for education towards unitive justice and human security is very stark here in the context of a divided society where civil society is still very, very weak. So all this emphasizes even more the urgency of our efforts. And I hear every day from young people who speak about feeling bereft of meaning and purpose, exactly the way that Jude explained. This whole paradigm of separation has left humanity. I see this in young people here. And so here we are now. We need to begin today, and this will be a long-term process, to seek the points of intersection among these different perspectives that were brought together. Just to sum it up, and I will ask each one of you to reflect a little bit on where you see the points of intersection. We will have no more than 15 minutes in total, so maybe not everybody will get a chance to speak, but if you feel moved, if you see points of intersection, please speak, because our effort now is going to move into a working group, consulting further, developing strategies for this effort. But what we've heard today is already a very powerful range, which I'd like to just try to somehow summarize. So first of all, we heard very clearly the indigenous context, the indigenous planetary wisdom context, which really speaks to us of a prior oneness and unity, which now has to be based on justice. There can be no unity without justice. That is very critical. So we cannot have world unity unless we really strengthen processes of unitive justice, and that is a mandate. We also heard about the power of moving from, as Audrey put it beautifully, from insular minds to global hearts, and opening ourselves to the mobilization movements of civil society across the world. So how can we connect with the mobilization movements of civil society across the world to mount or to enhance or to amplify the educational effort needed here? We also heard about the fact that military nationalism cannot ensure the survival of the planet. That, as Jonathan Groff put it very well, the state is our creation to express our values as people. And so the state, in a global society, in a planetary world, has to express the values of the global human family that is just to the whole family, to the security of the whole family. What does that mean? That is a huge shift from the kind of national attitudes I experience here, and probably many of us experience in the countries where we find ourselves. We also experienced, through Jude's shared thoughts, the healing power of the unitive narrative, which is what the world needs to experience, the healing power of the unitive narrative. And Scott helped us very nicely to see lines of communication possible with UNDP that can help agencies appreciate how the unitive narrative can be practical and very important in their work and goals. We also heard about the importance of strengthening justice institutions so that they actually have the jurisdictional reach to protect justice and human security. And here, of course, the International Court for the Environment, International Anti-Corruption Court, these are major and urgent challenges before us, but they're not just challenges for the people who are trying to carry out these changes. They are educational challenges. Until global civil society gets behind them, this can't really happen because there's so much inertia, as we have been reminded. And so again, Maya's comments reminded us of the need for global citizen and youth movement to break the inertia. And David Lorimer reminded us that global security is predicated on environmental security, and that cannot be achieved through fear. And that biosecurity, of course, is one of the latest ways to control fear, but in fact, security is not the path of fear. It is the path of building trust. And of course, Earl helped us think a little bit further about how hearts get connected to these very vast and very complex goals. So David left us with a question, which maybe our panel would like to consider. How can we build trust leading to fundamental system change? Where do you see the points of intersection among all these perspectives?
Maybe as I ask the question.
Are you asking all of us, or are you just asking one person?
So this is actually a question to the whole panel, and I saw you, Jonathan, moving to.
Yeah, I'll just really simply, the
Take the
Secretary
question.
General of, I mean, I didn't go into the institutional aspects because I didn't want to get into the grit of it, but I want to commend Maya for highlighting some of the cutting edge institutions, but there's lots of them, the OSCE, the WTO, WHO, but more importantly, the global economy is already integrated. The fact is that the financial world is one financial world. So that's already happened. What hasn't happened is a set of ideas that could be an organizing principle that is transformative. And let me give an example of that. 60 years ago, when we talked about the great inequities on the planet and the world talked about development, development was completely disconnected from the impact on the natural world. But today, even the greatest hypocrites will pay the price of hypocrisy by using the term sustainable development. And sustainable development is a concept that has become mainstream in a very rapid period of time. The Secretary General of the UN has committed to mainstreaming human security. And that means making it mainstreaming means making it cross-sectoral, to become the integrating principle of the SDGs. An integrating principle that one has seen develop in a very fast period of time would be gender equity, that has become within the world's intelligentsia a normative goal. And human security is a similarly transformative principle. So I'm a fellow and a trustee of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, which is engaging in a very focused project of creating massive coalitions of NGOs, civil society, and governments working in support of this UN endeavor with institutions in the UN to mainstream human security. And it's our hope that by September, in the period in which there's a focus on peace, that this transformative concept will be front and center. So in terms of serious players focusing on this transformation, someone highlighted UNDP, the latest United Nations Program for Development. I mean, I'm downloading because I know we're pressed for time and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but this is what I'm committed to doing because is I believe the existential threat of nuclear weapons is exactly that. By accident, madness, or design, they will be used, and their use will be existential to the human endeavor. But why do countries get these weapons? They get these weapons because the way in which security is set up is not by strategic stability. In reality, it is set up wherein countries with massive industrial bases are pursuing security by seeking military advantage. And the logical extension of that are weapons of mass destruction. So in order to address the underlying reason why, we already have the legal instruments. The ban treaty did not make nuclear weapons illegal. International humanitarian law did. The commitment to disarmament was already embodied in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The reason why another treaty is not going to get rid of nuclear weapons, the states with the weapons are not going to join the treaty, is they believe the only pursuit of security that brings realism to them is the pursuit of military advantage. So we have to put forward a realistic analysis and a morally coherent analysis And this community's job is to awaken the hearts, because that's what we hear from, that's our secret sauce, is we're speaking to the hearts of people to say, whatever religion you're in, whatever well you're using to get to the water table, remember the water table is one. The spirit that gives life to all is one. But this now becomes a political practical necessity. So UNDP's latest major report is called New Threats to Human Security in the Anthropocene, a call for greater solidarity. And the Anthropocene means the period in the evolution of the planet in which the natural processes and regenerative processes of the planet are not guiding evolution, but human intervention is. And
Thank you.
thus that focus has already happened institutionally. We need to support it. We need to identify whatever strengths we have to support this transformative idea.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I really appreciate your summary that what we need is a realistic and morally coherent analysis that speaks to the hearts, and I will add, to the minds of people as well, and offers organizing principles. I am very hopeful that that is what this core group of people will move towards. We have just a few minutes. Would anybody else would like to add to this concept of organizing principles that can essentially restore trust, that can really bring forth both hearts and minds? Is there anything else that any of the panelists would like to add? Please, Audrey. And then Scott.
Thank you so much, Elena. Well, this aspect of trust is very important because trust is built on our own personal as well as institutional integrity. So what is integrity? It's the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. And it is a state of being whole and undivided. It is the condition of being unified, unimpaired, and sound in construction. And it is an internal consistency or lack of corruption. So these are moral principles and ethical behaviors that are continuously being brought up in this whole issue of trust. It is a personal as well as institutional integrity, honesty. So this is very, very important because it speaks to our words and actions being in alignment with those values that we hold dear, that we don't lie, we don't steal, we don't disrespect ourselves and others, and that we not be out of integrity with ourselves and others. So at all times, it is a responsibility of the individual as we live our lives and as we interact with each other to have that integrity within our own hearts and within our own alignment and with that of others. Until we are able to bring ourselves to that place and we become expressions of integrity itself, we have to have lots of work to do to build trust. So ultimately, it is the individual's responsibility to develop that inner state of our moral principles and uprightness. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you very much for this very powerful and central reminder. Scott, you wanted to also add?
Thank you. So one of the wonderful characteristics of the unitive narrative is the appreciation and celebration of diversity. So I think one of the principles we would be wise to focus on is something in the Earth Charter called subsidiarity, which means that localities really should have as much control over their own lives and domain as possible. I think this would speak volumes to what David was talking about earlier about this creeping authoritarianism and all of those types of concerns. People want to feel respected and having control. We can help that with a focus on subsidiarity.
Thank you. That is also a very powerful and helpful reminder as we're moving towards the end of the streamed part of this panel. As we know that we will remain for a little bit of a further consultation, I do want to bring us back to the fact that as we work on internalizing the unitive narrative and living up to it with integrity, and really with spiritual center and groundedness, we cannot underestimate how powerful the forces of divisiveness and separation are. And so the practicality of principles that for collective action that can synergize and scale up what's already happening is extremely important. And we have had here a number of suggestions which I've kept track of. If there's anything else you'd like to add, you're welcome to. If not, we will move towards closing the public part of this panel, and I will ask the panelists to please remain so that we can do our working consultation.
Dr. Musakova, this is too important to rush.
Please.
No, I'm saying I think you have more time. I've been looking here. I want to allow this important conversation to continue, and so we can keep the live stream going a little bit longer, and then afterwards. As far as I can tell, there's nothing else here. This is for a little bit of time, but keep going, please. This is too critical.
Thank you. I also know that some of our panelists are already called to other places, so that's part of the challenge here. So if any one of you needs to excuse yourselves, I know Audrey, you may be needing to excuse yourself very soon. Please feel free to do that. This was quite a gift and we really appreciate it. And the conversation continues. And for the rest of us, do you have any other thoughts that you would like to put forth? Some of the organizing principles that were already suggested, just to sum it up, was first of all, personal and institutional integrity. Also gender equity, human security, and the very interesting suggestion around the principle of subsidiarity that attends to the appreciation and celebration of diversity. So these are some excellent suggestions that we've started with. Is there anything else that you feel moved to come forth with? This may also need to simmer and cook because the question is very large. We're talking about a very massive and multifaceted effort. So Jude, and after that, David, please, and Brother Phil.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, everyone. I'm really glad that we're moving so forward, or starting to move forward with very concrete steps. But one of the things that I feel is absolutely vital is based on the unitive narrative. A lot of other initiatives that we're being involved with is on an educational basis. How do we bring this understanding of intrinsic wholeness and meaning and purpose to the education of our children? Because if we teach our children that everything's separate, which is what's happening currently, by the time they get to 12 to 14 years old, even though they know within themselves that intrinsic wholeness, they move into that cultural norm and that societal norm. So somehow I feel our efforts have to really synergize with efforts in terms of unitive education based on the unitive narrative, which another synergy circle of our evolutionary leaders is focusing on. And alongside that, the work that our conscious business synergy circle is also involved with based on unitive narrative. And I remember a youth gathering in Denmark a couple of years ago where this understanding, before we'd articulated unitive narrative, came forward, and sort of the young people saying, of course we know this, but why aren't we taught this? So I think that all the efforts that we're making in terms of unitive justice and security have to synergize with that educative and transformational leadership approaches that are actually also happening.
Thank you so much, Jude. It really is quite apparent that this is going to be not one synergy circle, but synergy circles of synergy circles. And as I think Audrey said earlier, mobilization movements. But as we really open up this broad appreciation of how much goes into it, we're both broadening and at the same time focusing so that we can have what Jonathan called a realistic and morally coherent analysis that is put forth in different educational efforts. So let's hear David and then Brother Phil.
Yes, thank you very much. I absolutely endorse what you've just said, Jude. And for those of you who don't know, last 15 years, I've done a project called Inspiring Purpose, helping to inspire purpose in young people. And I put the link into the chat. But the point I was going to make was that I regard the nature, how we regard a human being and the nature of consciousness as absolutely pivotal to this reformulation that we need. For me, and this is the work of the Galileo Commission, the point that we're trying to make is that the human being has a deep spiritual nature, that we can access these deeper layers of reality, that the human being is not a machine, and that the transhumanist agenda is based on a massive metaphysical error, which assumes that humans are machines. This is the mechanistic metaphor from the 17th century. And that what we need to do is to merge the human with the machine and to upgrade and recalibrate the human. And this to me is a path without a heart. It's completely empty of what it really means to be human. And so that I think is an important starting point. And what everybody's said here about the oneness of life, the oneness of mind, this is the premise, this is the metaphysics, if you like, from which the ethics can be derived and which the politics can be a coherent expression.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. I think this is a very helpful and clear summary from metaphysics to ethics to politics to action. Yes, thank you. Brother Phil, and that may be our last comment, as we do need to take a little bit of time for our working group to coordinate. Brother Phil, please.
I just wanted to say that it's so important that those billions of our human relatives who have never had an opportunity for an education, who are uninformed masses, who have no way to articulate their desire for peace. We've got to find a way to bring this dialogue there. We have this great dialogue. 382 million people in the world, mother tongue is English. That's all. Just a little bit less than that Spanish. How many different relatives are not being able just to hear this message? This is what I think is a great challenge, is how can we really bring this message to be simple, to the heart, so that people can begin to experience moments of peace and understand what that is. That's what I see as a big challenge that we have to work on.
Thank you so much, Brother Phil. I think this is perhaps the most poignant way to end the formal part of this panel with your final words. How can we bring this message to millions of hearts so people can begin to experience moments of peace? Thank you. I want to thank all of our panelists. We have covered profound and expansive ground here. This is just a beginning. I particularly want to thank our host, John Raymer, who has faithfully been serving for days and months and years, and certainly around the clock the last week, along with Ben Bowler. Thank you very much, Brother John. Without you, this would be very, very difficult. And we can end the streaming part, unless you would like to end some closing words before we end the streaming. That would be lovely.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that this stream is like no other stream. And this time is really like no other time. This is the rudest awakening that's happening for everybody right now. And what we're finding these last couple of days, people are coming in pain. We know there's this all systems breakdown, this deconstruction. And as this is happening, it's opening people. People want to connect to the positive. They want to be in this conversation. And that's our desire, to have this 90 days, 99 days of peace through unity be a platform upon which we're not just pitching and influencing each other in our thinking, but our thinking is changing the way we're speaking and changing the way we're acting. And this is the opportunity that we have this summer for the North, this winter for the South, to actually really bring about the concrete action that I know, Elena, you are guiding us there. I mean, you have a passion and a focus about it. And I'm reminded by David Graeber's, the anthropologist's words, when he said that the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make and could just as easily make differently. And I appreciate you, Jonathan, reminding us that it was 1648, that we made it up, that we're all rooted in our territories. That's not true anymore. This virtualization of our world is giving us a chance to reorganize everything with self-sovereignty. We're non-state activists, and we're able to bring about change in ways we don't realize our power. We're just waking up to it. So I am inspired, I am moved, I am devoted and dedicated to working during this time to demonstrate that we really can make the change we need to be, because the formal legitimacy doesn't have the capability, and the capability doesn't have the formal legitimacy.
What a summary. That's it.
It's out of balance. We got to get it back in balance. So I'm going to end the live stream now so we can talk about next steps here. But thank you so much. There's so much wisdom here. There's so much to learn from what each of you are saying. This is the
And
best way
thank
to
you
start
too,
my day.
John.